Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Counselor's Office. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor, and welcome to the next episode of Bungie broke the game, and so now they're putting out another explanation of why it broke. All jokes aside, we're finally getting some dev insight into the whole Perk Wang issue, which I found to be very comical. It really, truly comical. Oh, my background's a little jank. Uh-oh. Fix that. Boom, there it is. Fixed it. Nailed it. All right, yeah, so we're gonna just go through the article. I made like a whole nice new page, so we just look at it and go into detail about it and just give some thoughts, right? Enjoy the Fable music, by the way. I chose the cemetery music for a reason. If you've ever played Fable 1 or Fable Anniversary, you know. All right, Dev Insight, the Perk Wang issue. By the way, you know Bungie's serious when they pull out the graphs. Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Friedland, the technical owner for the engineering team that, among other things, owns the Destiny 2 reward system. Wow, he owns it. I ended up leading the programming work around the Perk Wang issue investigation and will be walking you through some of what happened on our end. The timing of our community team escalating this issue to us was actually quite serendipitous. When this first popped up on my team's radar, Vince Davies, one of the engineers on my team, was just wrapping up work on a script to help us validate the stat distributions on next-gen armor for Frontiers. Cool, so they're working on the armor, so don't waste your time on the old stuff. With a few minor tweaks, we were able to use this script to also validate weapon perks, simulating thousands of drops per minute and logging the data for us to chew through. Using this tool, we were able to quickly verify the community's findings. So why was it not addressed at the very beginning then? Why were we like, hey, we got a tool, we're gonna check it out? Instead it was, we're not weighing anything. There's nothing wrong. No, there was clearly something wrong, but okay. Our findings, while the probability of any single perk was even, the probability of pairs was anything but. Here are results of dropping almost 100k versus chill inhibitors. As the community had discovered, some perk combinations are more common, some are less common, and some are almost impossible to get. Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, that pretty much looks what the community found out, right? Pretty much what the community found out. It was like, yeah, bait and switch, envious assassin. Yeah, I would definitely say is almost non-existent. That would be definitely a thing. To understand what is happening here, we'll first need to take a deep dive into some math and computer science to define what random means to us. I think this is very important because I think people assume that RNG really exists. And to a certain extent it does, but it doesn't really. You can't truly make something random, right? Like flipping a coin is pretty random, but flipping a coin on the phone, I mean, it's a programmed, it's not like exactly one for one, but it's close as random as you can get. True random events are things that we can often assign probabilities, but can't predict. This includes things like flipping a coin, or see, I just said that, or a die roll, as well as broader physical phenomena, like where lightning will strike, or when a radioactive atom will decay. For all of those, we can make general predictions about how likely something will be, but we can't forecast exactly what will happen. We are also unable to make a given result repeat when we want it to. Computers can't do true random on their own. And when true random is required, people have to turn to things like atmospheric noise, i.e. static on radio or TV, recordings of the cosmic background radiation, or even walls of lava lamp. What are we talking about? However, most things do not need truly random numbers, and for games, we generally don't want true random since we can't control it. Many years ago, some smart people came up with the idea of pseudo-random number generators, PRNG. The general idea behind PRNG is that given a seed number, often the current system time, we run a series of mathematical operations to end up with a fairly random number. You can then use that new number as the seed for your next random number, ultimately giving you a sequence of numbers that is random enough. One big advantage of PRNGs over true random for games is they are repeatable. When using a given starting seed, you can guarantee always to get the same sequence of numbers, which means that if you have the same starting seed and the same inputs, then the game will turn out the same way. Games use this for many different uses, from save films to fair tournaments and more. Okay? Sure. One big disadvantage for PRNGs, as called out in the name, is that they are pseudo-random. There can be patterns that appear in the output of PRNGs, and depending on how you use them, you may end up amplifying those patterns instead of getting something that appears random. To help visualize various algorithms, I will be using examples data generated with help of Joe Venson, our engineer director. A lot of new names of people that I've never heard of. So this is interesting for sure. We will start with the base use case of PRNG. Use 1 as the first seed, and then use the last result as the seed for the next value. This results in a nice cloud of points with no clear identifiable pattern, similar to the static on an old TV screen. This is exactly what we want, as it means that our random numbers are fairly evenly distributed across the possibility space, and that there shouldn't be any clear patterns when looking at our sequence of numbers. I see TV noise. Huzzah, you did the thing. Unfortunately, on Destiny, we can't always feed the previous results back in as the next seed. We have many places where we require stable, predictable seeds when generating new random numbers, and this new seed selection was ultimately what caused our problems. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the bugs, or the bug, a debug. In Destiny 2, we create a system for items called the socket and plug system. This system handles a large percentage of what players see as gear, including weapon perks, mods, shaders, masterwork, and even armored stats. Randomized items were added in Forsaken, and the main way they work is through the socket and plug system. Are you telling me that this issue's been going on since Forsaken? Holy crap. Imagine all the guns that we have farmed where it has been plagued with the double perk weigh system. That's crazy. That's crazy. Let's see. In Destiny 2, a weapon will have sockets for its barrels, magazines, and other perks. When we drop that weapon, we will select plugs to insert into those sockets from the list of legal plugs. And those plugs will each represent the perks you're familiar with. You can thank the flexibility of the system for all the mayhem of the crafting last year. Good times. One of the few times that there was a bug in the game that benefited players, and it was actually a really fun time. Players can have different sockets enabled on the same item depending on what they have done or how they got it, as seen in the original implementation of Artifice Armor. This means, Artifice Armor just drops with ass stats nowadays. This means that when initializing our new drop, we can't assume that we will always initialize sockets in the same order. Make sure that vendors offer the same perks to all players, even if some players have more sockets. We use a different seed for every socket being initialized. Unfortunately, this extra work to add stability ended up causing our bug. Wait, so you're telling me that there's a possibility that everyone could have random vendor roles? Ooh, that sounds like a win to me. Why not? Imagine everyone checking to see like, oh, did I get a god roll? Ah, screw that guy. I got the god roll. Screw you, dude. Oh no. Let's see. To select a stable seed for each socket on an item, we end up combining a number of different pieces of information together using a hash function, a mathematical way of taking some large chunk of data and turning it into a single number. While this new hash number was guaranteed to be stable, as we originally intended, because the socket index was the last piece being added in the hash, we often ended up in a case where the hashes were sequential, and these sequential seeds are ultimately what caused the bad behavior. Going back to our tables, let's start by looking at hashes of sequential numbers. While the hashes themselves are not sequential, we can see some fairly clear patterns in how the numbers are coming out. This means that when we look at hashes of sequential numbers, we are likely to be able to find patterns in the output hashes. While this isn't on its own a bad thing, it does mean that there are some interesting patterns in the data we are feeding into the PRNG. Yeah, I see some massive gaps. Yeah, I'm sure that's not good. If we can then drop those numbers into a random number generator, we can see that those patterns in the input data have corrupted our outputs, resulting in some patterns in the data. These patterns are specifically what resulted in some perks pairs being easy to get while others were almost impossible to find. Early sandbox investigations. All right, we're finally getting to the part that I'm interested in, is the investigation part. Ultimate question, why didn't you investigate RNG earlier? I think that's a fair question. Each time we see player feedback about difficulties in obtaining specific roles, our sandbox team has taken a look at data weapon first. Weapon perks have never had intentional weighing, and in the absence of strong evidence that something more was going on, we left it at that. Hey Joe, are we implementing a perk weighing? Nah, brah, we don't got time for that. Okay, that's strong enough evidence to ignore their evidence. Holy crap, man. I love that. Guys, we're not going to take the time to actually make sure that something's not broken if there isn't any actual like reason to think that. Granted, people were pouring out all these charts to show like, hey, this is happening. And the first time around, they did nothing. They just said, we're not weighing it. The second time around, when the whole freaking community became doctoral mathematicians and brought all the plot points, Bungie's like, yeah, we can't ignore that now. We can't. Sorry, we can't. I don't know what other game has such a issue with RNG. That's what I'm interested in. Like, I don't know any other game that has had this issue, which is crazy to me. And I think it's a problem with complicity, where you're not willing to actually check every little part of the system. It's like going through like a car and you check the basics, like, oh, is the oil taken care of? What about like radiator oil? Change the tires, but you don't stop to really check and see like, is the I'm trying to think of a part that people don't really check. Is your muffler going out? I don't know. Your muffler, like who thinks of mufflers? Is your muffler going out or it needs replaced? Let's see. We do brakes because that's normal. Like, but how's the head gaskets? Are we people checking head gaskets? Like, not everyone can check head gaskets, but I'm just saying, like, there's parts of the car that you don't think about until there's a problem, and then it's very noticeable. And so I understand, like, that's a thing, but then you take your car into a shop and you're supposed to get a routine check where they check all this stuff for you. They check to make sure that your car is working, and they check to see if it's good. Like, you're supposed to do that. That's what they recommend that you do, is get your car checked out and do a thorough look at it to make sure that it lives and continues to go strong. But I will give Bungie a little break because I don't do that. But it's still funny that this is not a car. This is a game where you're selling a product. So it is a little different when you're selling a product versus it's just me being lazy and not wanting to look at my car and make sure everything's working. Let's see. Random number generator is so low level and foundational to the game, to all games, that in the absence of clear, abundant evidence that something's off, it doesn't always make sense to take an engineer, task an engineer with an investigation. Surely if something like this had been a frequent and obvious issue, we'd have noticed it a long time ago, right? Like all game development, it's a question of priority and trade-offs. Many of an engineering question and Q&A are, wait, you have Q&A still? Are focused on building the future of Destiny. Yeah, but the problem that you can't focus on building the future of Destiny when the previous things are broken, right? It's not like it's trying to build a building on a broken foundation. It's not going to go well. The building's going to collapse. Like, you can make a nice new pretty building, but if the foundation's still old and crumbling and decrepit, it's going to fall all through. I disagree with this. I think making sure that your system is working correctly is intelligent and is better for the health of the game. This is why we have so many goddamn bugs, is because we're like, it's not a problem now, we'll worry about it later. Okay, again, what other game has this kind of issue? Let's put that out there. What other game has had this kind of issue? Oh yeah. Like all games developments, in this case, the community organizing around a data gather effort was what made a strong case that there was an issue to be found, and we need to start a deep. Oh my God, They admit it. We weren't going to do shiitake, but because you made us look bad and made us and pulled our pants down and laughed at us, we actually had no choice but to do it. You guys did our job for us. That is stupid. I am so sorry. The fact that they openly admit that they did this 100% because of the community. They were going to do nothing if it wasn't for the community. From investigation, we found that the issue had been in the game for some time, but it's only recently received substantial community focus and traction. That's because crafting here's the thing. I think early on, well, first off, you sunset a lot of weapons, so that was the most recent thing. Most people had gotten god rolls and weapons, and then as things progressed, we got crafting, which kind of negated the whole RNG. It wasn't until recently when they rolled back the crafting stuff that now people are starting to notice some of the cracks that have been there the whole time. But you gotta think, since Witch Queen, crafting has been a thing, like heavily. And people were doing cheeses and things to farm hundreds of thousands of guns. Like, we remembering Witch Queen when people were using Google Stadia to do the multi-chest farm where they were just pumping out to try to get a god roll funnel web because they had removed Recluse and people were desperate to have another Recluse substitute. So people got on to Stadia or like not Stadia, but use Stadia, Google, like there was a whole workaround and they had to patch that because people were abusing the crap out of it and they could do it also for free. Yeah, I remember that. So let's not act like people weren't upset about some of the farming, because the farming and the drop rates were still pretty bad back then. They were still pretty bad and there was complaints. It's just you brought in with Lightfall and all these other DLCs, you brought new players in and now they're being acclimated to, crafting, and so that's their norm. But then you have an episode like Revenant where you remove and they're getting dungeons, like they're experiencing some dungeons where there's no crafting, and so they're being hit with PRNG, and they're starting to notice, like, man, I'm spending hours on this and I'm not even getting one chill clip, or I'm not getting chill clip with this specific role. Like, why do I keep getting the same rolls? Like, I've got the same roll like 30 times, like this 2 perk combos 30 times, but not this one ever once. So when you have that happening, and then you have your dedicated veterans who start sniffing out, like, yeah, this is starting to become a commonplace problem. What's going on here? Especially when you have like the most sought after GL that everyone's like raving after. And so, yeah, I mean, you put that together, people are going to notice more. But I still find it's inexcusable. Like, well, you guys didn't notice, so it's not our problem. But if you're doing your job and checking your systems, you're checking everything. Like, you can't drive a boat with hundreds of thousands of passengers and not do your diligence to check everything in the boat to make sure that it's safe and it's going to run. And that when you're out in the middle of the ocean, it's just going to sink like the Titanic because you didn't bother to check all the things that you should be checking in the boat, just because at the moment it wasn't a problem. It wasn't apparent. It wasn't apparent that there was water leaking. So we're not going to worry about the fact that there's a piece of the engine that's about to go out or cause an explosion that then just sinks the boat. I don't agree with that logic. I just don't. You're running a business, you're running a product, you're selling a product. It is your responsibility to make sure the product is functioning, regardless if people notice it or not. It is still your responsibility, because when they notice, people realize that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing and the product is flawed. Guess who gets blamed? You, and rightfully so. I don't agree with this logic. That's not how things work in society. That's not how I'm just not going to do my job because it's not a problem. That's not, no. If I didn't do my job, sure, I may get away with it for a while, but then when I do get caught, I'm going to get fired. Anyways, from our investigation, we found the issue had been in the game for some time. It was only recent. Players began focusing primarily on the multi-mac submachine gun from Iron Banner and the VS Chill inhibitor. Yes, because these were sought after and these were not craftable. Even though the bug impacted all weapons, it could sometimes lead to desirable perks being easier to earn, and thus went unnoticed for some time. Yeah, it benefited people. Several overlapping issues are responsible for this. The issue is most egregious on weapons with 6 perk columns. Some similarly desirable weapons over the years have more or fewer than this, masking the impact of the issue to a degree. The bug is heavily mitigated by perk columns with multiple choices. Adept weapons and playlist weapons have access to multiple perks per column. Most in-game weapons sources such as raids, trials, and nightfalls have adept weapons. Players could earn more perk columns on Vanguard, Crucible, and Gambit via reputation resets. The bug is largely irrelevant on crafted weapons, which have been applied to raids and most non-in-game weapon sources since the introduction of crafting in the Witch Queen. Ultimately, our community was able to compile enough evidence over time to prove that even with appropriate content setup or equally weighted perks, there was a deep issue to solve. I still think your community should not be doing your job. I'm sorry. Name another community that's doing the job of the developer right now. The fix. Ben Thompson, one of the more tenured engineers, recognized the issue almost immediately. For anyone who would work around with the original Whisper of the Worm mission launch, you may remember having an issue getting the Blight public event to actually appear. Oh god, that was horrible. Cabal again? Yeah. It turned out that the underlying problem here is similar, where we are using sequential inputs to feed the seed for random number generator. So you're telling me this is a problem you guys had already based on an event? And you never stopped? So you have experienced this in the game already. And so we never once stopped to make sure that this wasn't repeating itself again. Also, you didn't, this wasn't a problem that could have just been solved at that moment, like whatever the PRNG issue was going on, you didn't just solve it then? I don't know, I have so many like doubts. Press F to doubt. The fix in the case, and here as well, was to multiply our hash inputs by large prime numbers to better distribute them, also known as salting the data. While there will still be a regular step between sequential inputs, the actual value is now significantly different between 2 sequential inputs, and thus we're avoiding some of the patterning issues. When we hash these salted inputs, we end up with a much better distribution series of hash values. Why couldn't you just do that from the beginning? If that's what you did back then, why didn't you implement that with the rest of your system then? Can we really I hope they explain that. Like, if this was what you did back then for the Taken event or the Whisper mission, then why didn't you just apply that across the board? Surely you would have had the thought, like, well, what if this became an issue with perks or guns or something else in the game? Did we never stop to think about that? These are things that I would like to know. And when we feed the salted hashes into random number generator, we once again end up with a nice point cloud with no clear discernible patterns. Again, I would like to know why we didn't just do that for the rest of the game in general. Going back to our original test with VS Chill Inhibitor, what our perk rolls look like with a fix, all the perk pairs show relatively evenly, with some minor variation around the average as what would be expected from a sampling or random events. The probability of getting any specific perk pair should now be close to true random as originally intended. So here we go. Yep. Unironically, they gave out a free god roll, like maybe like a 3 out of 5. I did one run of the first encounter. I got a 5 out of 5 with a handling masterwork, spike nades, and a hard launch. 5 out of 5 god roll. My first run. That's kind of funny. Not gloating. The fix for perk selection went live in update. I'm not saying it because I don't care about numbers anymore. And we plan to audits over multiple. And we plan to do audits over multiple areas of the code base soon to watch for any similar issues. Now you do your job? Oh, let's finish it up. All in all, these learnings will empower us to prevent this happening again, or at the very least, help us do better spot checking from time to time to ensure the bug doesn't resurface. I would like to thank the community for their impressive data gathering, which help us identify this rather than insidious issue lurking in what was fairly old and proven code. What the hell? We will help us do better spot checking. Why is it that it has to be the community that does your job for you to actually do your job? I'm sorry, they are actively admitting that the community did their job. It was because of the community. And now they're going to actually spot check. Now they're going to look at the rest of the car instead of just checking the oil and the tires. They're going to check the engine and the fuel line, and they're going to check everything to make sure that the car go burr. You're going to tell me that now you're empowered? We're empowered to prevent this from happening again, though you admitted that the Whisper of the Worm had the same issue. You just admitted that it was an issue and you solved that issue, but you didn't apply it to the rest of the game? You didn't stop to say, hey, you remember that time where the sequential data wasn't working correctly and we got this like issue? Man, it's almost like we should double check to see that does not happen again. Like, I just don't, it is so mind numbing that people are giving a pass to this. There's no way you can give a pass to this. Again, if I'm riding a boat and then suddenly there's an explosion in the engine and then we start sinking, I'm gonna wonder like, what the hell, man? What the hell? Oh, well, it wasn't a problem at the moment. We didn't see any leaks and the engine was running fine at the moment. We didn't check everything. It was just not, what's that? We have data now, we're sinking. So now we've got to check, we're to spot check any future boat that we take on a cruise with thousands of people. We're gonna actually spot check the boat to make sure that things are running and not gonna break and possibly sink the boat and kill people. Like, where is, yeah, obviously that's an extreme, like, where no one's gonna die from Destiny. Depending on who you talk to, saying someone's personality is tied to Destiny, they actually probably will die. But the point is, do your job. That's it. That's it. At the bottom, this should have never happened if they did their job. I'm going to, in the wise words of Sony Interactive, Bungie, get off your ass and do your job. By the way, those actually are the words of Sony, so I'm actually quoting them. Quote, get off your ass and do your job. This is ridiculous. I'm glad they were honest. You know what? That's something you have to say. I appreciate that they were honest. They were absolutely honest. I didn't see a sorry or an apology. I saw a thank you. Thank the community for their impressive thank you for doing our job. Thank you. Hey guys, thanks for that. We don't need to pay anyone to test our game because we got you. You pay us to test our game. Not an apology. Not a single, nowhere in this do I see an apology saying we are so sorry. Not an apology. There's nothing. And you can say, well, they gave us all the god rolls, then you could farm. Like, bitch, I don't care. I don't care. Giving me free loot doesn't make an apology. I want like, you know what? We done effed up. We done effed up. We done effed up. We're sorry. We ignored you until you put data on the table. We didn't do our job, but because now you made us look like asses, now we're gonna spot check. You've empowered us not to look like asses, to not make us look like clowns, because there's not any other game that I've ever seen or heard of that has had a community do the developer's job to the extent now they actually feel like they have to spot check the game to make sure that this isn't an issue. They literally said it right here. Oh my God. Oh, I'm done. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor. Let me know what you think down below. As always, game out. Bungie, you're such a